Hello, I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and this is the Intuitive Pool podcast. First of all, I want to say thank you to the community of listeners because there have been breathtaking ripples that have occurred from listening to this podcast, and I'm excited to be witness of many, many more. This year, I'm dedicating this podcast to the theme of 2023 being a breakthrough year. No matter how successful, fulfilled, and happy we are, and the truth is that sometimes we're not, we all have thresholds we've placed on ourselves on how loving and powerful we've allowed ourselves to be. Following the intuitive pull does not negate our vulnerabilities and our humanness. Oftentimes, following the intuitive pull asks us to see our blind spots and to bring what has been in the shadow to light. And when we do, we can see that being fully human is in fact the precursor to remembering that we are infinitely greater than this mortal body, that we are infinitely connected beyond this time and space, not in spite of our humanity, but because of the intricate weaving of all aspects of our precious humanity. When we take responsibility and remember that you have the power to decide what you choose, and we fuse that with a letting go of control and surrendering into the plans that you didn't make, there is nothing that you cannot transform. My wish is that you see that the deeper you go, the greater your wealth in all ways, and that authenticity is always profitable. Have fun. Hello, dear Intuitive Pool community. Welcome back. This is an episode that I had dreamt about for actually probably about 6 months. I have been dying to interview my hero partner, my dear friend, Charbel Zeaiter. It's taken 6 months for us to get here for some reason. I guess that we're going to find out why it's taken us this long to have this conversation. First of all, I just want to introduce Charbel. I met Charbel probably about over 20 years ago, I think it was, at a party. And I looked over at Charbel and I thought, hello. It was definitely more than 20 years ago. I was single. And then I learned that Charbel, would not be into me in terms of
you're beautiful,
preferring the female kind. And so we laughed about that, and we said that we would set each other up on blind dates, which we did. Yours was pretty disastrous. Mine didn't turn up.
Yeah, that was so funny. Imagine if it was Married at First Sight.
Oh my God, can you imagine that? Oh my God. So Charbel and I have really walked life together. We call each other hero partners. If anybody knows Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, there are certain people in your life that you just walk alongside with, and we're always in parallel. And so Charbel's a very, very dear friend of mine, and also a dear friend of my family's, and a wonderful mentor to my son. So that is him. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about his professional bio, just so that you can get context as to who Charbel is in his leadership. Charbel is a seasoned founder and well-regarded expert in customer experience design, technology, and education. With over 26 years' experience, he has worked with industry leaders in digital and various industries worldwide, launching startups and improving digital experiences for companies of all sizes. Charbel's current focus is something that I have a lot of trouble understanding, but we're going to go there anyway. Charbel's current focus is on emerging Web3 technologies, and his passion for elevating human experiences while serving the planet is evident in his latest startup, Planet Neo. He founded Planet Neo, a fictional shared universe or metaverse that includes games, educational explorations, and media such as animations. His most recent startup exit was Academy XI, a company he founded in 2014. It still is a wonderful company. It's still alive. And when I knew Charbel at the time that Charbel led Academy XI, it was an incredible company where they created short courses that prepared students for jobs of the future, propelling thousands of students' careers. There's a new chapter, however, about to emerge here And I can't wait to see I can't wait to see it come to life. Charbel's exciting journey has brought him, and this is so true, to the edge of reality. Charbel is a futurist. He sees vision before anybody else can see it. And I remember, maybe about 5 years ago, I remember saying to you, and I even wrote a post about it, don't doubt your vision just because other people can't see it yet. Mm. You are that futurist. You've got that inner eye that sees new realities that other people can't see until they do, until they catch up. I always feel like you're ahead of time. So thanks for being with me.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's what an intro, Jesus. Yeah, that barely touches some of the stuff I've done. God, talk about colourful. Anyhow.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. You've got a lot of life experiences, my God. So I just want to frame up this conversation, because actually I feel that one of the reasons why it took us about 6 months to have this conversation is because I needed to see something that is going to hold this conversation in a certain context. And it's the context of sacred leadership.
Mm.
And this has only arrived in the last week, where Dr. Carol Haddad and Sammy Howard, Dr. Carol Haddad, who's an integrative oncologist, and Sammy Howard, who's a pranic energy healer, who you've heard me talk about many times on this podcast. I even wrote about them on the latest newsletter. You've heard them on this podcast as well. They facilitated their first retreat together for people who have cancer and people who had cancer. And I was on a Zoom call with them last week, hearing them talk about their experience. And the only thing that Carol could say when I would say, how was it? How was it? Or when people would ask her, how is it? She said to me, how do I even put it into words? I can't put it into words. There's no way that I can encapsulate what happened into words other than to say that it was beyond expectations, way beyond expectations. And when I was looking at them speak to what was happening on the retreat, I literally could see this space in between them and their participants. I literally could see this space. And what I was seeing was two people who completely led from presence, who completely led from intuition, who read what was going on. They were the radar in that moment, and they followed the intuitive pull. They had let go of control. They were surrendered to a plan that was much greater than the plan that they could ever make. And it's this inner state of beingness, where I've seen time and time again, and it's the only thing that really matters to me. It's this inner state of beingness that is the space where miracles are seated. And such was the case for them. And so being in awe of what I was watching with Dr. Carol and Sammy has made me be even in more reverence to that space in between, to that beingness, the state of beingness. And really, if I was to define it in 2 words, they're in their sacred leadership. And Charbel, that's who I have seen you as. I've seen you demonstrate sacred leadership from the time that we started walking together. When was it? When did we start walking together?
Gosh, I still remember the call that I got from you. I was doing this contract at CBA. We actually met, as you said, over 20 years ago, and we did do some work together. However, the real work, I feel, started in 2013 when I got a call. You were excited, and I could hear a bit of nervousness in the voice. Something's landed. I don't remember the exact words, so this is not a quote, but it was the essence of the conversation. I was sneaking out of a meeting because I didn't want to be in a meeting. I was working at one of Australia's largest banks, another contract, and it was things were going on there. And you were describing what was going on, what had landed around this new program around leadership and authenticity. And I can't remember if that was the time where you coined, authenticity is profitable, but I'm pretty sure that was it.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And all I said was yes. And you kept talking, and there was a bit of nervousness about it. And because we've been doing a bit of work prior to that. And largely it was conversational. And when I say unstructured, that's not to do with how you're approaching it, but it was unstructured in that it was a free sort of exchange of time. You know, we were just doing that. And you got to the point through the nerves where you said, I just have to let you know, because I'd already said, yes, I'm doing the program, right? And you got to that point where you paused and you said, I need to charge for this. And I said, yes, I'm doing the course. I said, yes, already. And I think the work started that week after. You know, I know it was midweek. I was sitting there again, avoiding work, avoiding meetings because it was a contract, and I love that word contract because the first three letters kind of told me everything that it meant about who I was at that point.
Huh.
Chasing the funds and certainly not chasing any meaning.
Huh.
And we started work that week after. That was in 2013. And I was doing this little transition thing where I thought, okay, I can keep doing this, keep doing the work, and not quite ready to launch anything yet, but I'll keep working. And I got to this point where I remember sitting in this meeting, and there were 20 people in a room. I was the designer in the whole process, and there were 20 people sitting in this room. And the meeting was about whether we should call this thing. So the project was getting this little field into the online bank to collect people's tax file number. And the discussion was, and it was a heated discussion, do we call this tax file number, my tax file number, or your tax file number? And I left the meeting, took my boss to the side and I said, this is my last meeting. I'm sorry, I'm finishing up today.
Wow.
And that was, for me, that was like, and it wasn't about them, because that's how a lot of corporations do function or malfunction. It was more about who the hell, I was going to say fuck, but can I swear? Who the fuck
Oh my God, we swear a lot on this podcast.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I always tick explicit when I'm when I'm publishing.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Clean or explicit? Definitely not clean. Explicit.
Totally. Isn't that funny? Because I was so sick of how I was showing up.
Mm.
You know, it was like great. It was good money, but I was blowing all the money because it was just like resolving whatever tension there was about being there and not following what I was meant to follow. So I did it. I quit. And as you know, a couple of months later is when I started Velvet Onion and then the school, which is now Academy Exercise. So it's been a 10-year journey that we've been doing really, really big work together.
Yeah.
Really. And it's big work.
Really big work. As I've been saying recently, well, just actually not recently, I've been saying it in the last 3 days. This is about an inner PhD. Like really, the level of commitment that you have and the level of commitment that I have to continuing to be the all that we can be, which is infinite. We are on a perpetual inner PhD, which is so rewarding. So it's not about I just want to make this point. It's not about perpetually navel gazing and going around in circles and not being free. It's absolutely about being free.
Yeah.
And going into even newer levels of freedom and newer levels of freedom and newer levels of freedom, which is where you're at right now. So seeing this podcast this year as being dedicated to it being a breakthrough year, I know that you have experienced several breakthroughs. In my experience, I seem to experience a major breakthrough once every 10 years. That seems to be my pattern. I can go back to 20 years ago and wow, that changed my life. 10 years ago, that changed my life. I feel like I'm about to have another life-changing year this year, which is why it's called the breakthrough year. And of course, we experience breakthroughs in between that. Of course we do. God, I feel like I experience one every week. Yeah. But in terms of those big life-changing, my life has never been the same type of breakthroughs. Can you talk about some of those moments for you?
Sure. I'll go back to when I got that call from you. I feel that was such an epic breakthrough year for me because, I was well known in the industry of digital, customer experience, which, user experience design. I was, some people call me the godfather or grandfather of, more like grandfather, really, that's the truth, of the whole space, because I was one of the first in Australia to be doing it. At that point where you called me, I'd been doing a lot of contract work. So, going from place to place, working, meeting heaps of people, great people. earning the money, but of course nothing to show for it. And it wasn't about having anything to show for it, but it was great for a while. But after a little while, it became a habit, a very, very unconscious habit. When I got to that point, I realized in relationships, and certainly in some sort of friendships I was holding, even in the work I was doing, I constantly felt, once I got a bit of awareness, that I was always in a space of compromise. Somebody would need something or need me to be somehow for them. Therefore, I would adjust and make some edits to make things comfortable for people.
So you'd adjust yourself. Is that what you're saying? You'd make adjustments within yourself.
Totally. It was constant editing. I was like I was like this Photoshop of myself. Kept cutting bits out, placing bits on, doing things that really were about deprioritizing myself for the sake of comfort for everyone else. And that's true family. I can delve I'm not going to delve into the family story. That's probably another podcast, but at a DNA level, when I look at my ancestry and the choices that have come through the many, many, many generations and what's been embedded in our DNA, it's quite a familiar thing to do. And I see it with a lot of friendships too. And that's one of my defaults where I get to people who are willing to listen is about the editing of oneself, which is, so I got to that point where I came up with, I think you and I were working on themes for the year. And my theme for that one was about compromise, ... the fuck up. And
I remember that so well.
Yeah. And because it was like, okay, so great. I'm so happy to compromise. And from that day I made the choice, it was like, I will compromise as long as I'm being stretched or I'm growing or I'm becoming a more evolved version of who I'm meant to be in this world, rather than the edited version of who I felt I needed to be for everybody else. So that was a big, big, big breakthrough. And not to say that, I haven't done any sort of unconscious compromising since, because I certainly have. However, it really opened up my own lexicon of things and my ability to actually name what is going on and when and why I've done certain things. So it's really, really opened up a whole lot of awareness, particularly with language, how I speak, how people speak to each other. So that was a big, 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 big breakthrough. And of course, from that was, I thought, okay, I'm going to set up my agency. And that was towards the end of that year. You remember that one quite well.
Yes.
We were coaching and I'd landed my first client, which was, I don't even recall how. Oh, that's right. The marketing manager got in touch. It was a startup. They had a limited budget. They needed to do an overhaul of the product that was working quite well for them. And so I took it on and did it all myself, like the UX, the design, all the research. Made a reasonable amount of money, not billions, but enough. And then I found an office. Remember that one in Surrey Hills? And it was literally, I needed a $20,000 deposit, and that's what I had in the bank, in the account, the business account. So I dropped the $20,000, and of course I completely freaked out, thinking, okay, that's it. I've got no more business funds. What am I going to do? I've got to fit this place out. Blah blah blah. 3 days later, I get a call from a woman who I'd worked with, and she put me in touch with somebody who was looking to train their entire UX team, because at that point, it wasn't just an agency. I was thinking, I want an integrated agency and an integrated school, teaching the skills that we do as an agency. Stupidly big ambition. And of course, it wasn't stupidly big. It made a lot of sense to me. And that was the beginning. So that client said, I've got $20-something thousand to spend. and the fun bit is that they paid up front.
This is the thing, right? This is the thing. So we're kind of giving the listeners an inside look into us, because the amount of conversations that we have had over the years, not recently, but around that time, probably for the next 5 years or so, where you'd come to a call with me and say, Phil, anxious and worried about something and a potential proposal that you'd put in, you hadn't heard back from them, they weren't coming back to you, blah, 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 blah. It was this common pattern, right, of they're not coming back to me, or I've lost something, or I don't have enough money. And every time you would come to me and we'd talk about that, and then we'd see what was really going on inside of you that created that external reality.
Yeah.
We would get off the phone or Zoom, and immediately you would have an email in your inbox or a phone call saying, we're ready to proceed.
Totally.
Almost every time.
Totally. Do you remember that one about a year and a half forward after that?
Yeah.
I had to make payroll. I had a staff of 12 and the money was dropping, and then literally landed this project. And again, I had to pay for it up front because it was the end of tax year. It was a $250,000 project that they literally had to spend it before the end of the year. And I was thinking, how am I going to make payroll? I was freaking out, growing this staff, and, things just went quiet, dead quiet for a while, and bang. Yeah.
So this wasn't the languaging that we were using back then. But when I talk about this, the space in between, those situations happened because you'd go into that space in between, right? You'd go within and you'd have a look at what was going on, and you'd become really present, and you'd go to a place of ownership and humility.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes, you'd feel all the feelings that would go with it, even shame. And we'll talk about that later. And then you'd love yourself. And then bang. And so there's an expression that I'm using right now that nothing but miracles is the new standard. Nothing but miracles is the new standard.
I love that.
I don't think that in most people's lives, $250,000 needing to be spent because it's end of tax year, so they need to pay you up front $250,000. I don't really think that happens very often.
No.
And not in the circumstances where you had to make payroll. Like, that doesn't really happen very often. Thus is the importance, right? This is the importance of the inner PhD, like the inner work. It's like critical.
Absolutely. And as you said when you introduced it, this particular podcast, is that there's always this new layering. So as we get to a certain point, it's just like, with training, any sort of fitness training that we do, is that we hit a plateau with the training. And for me, and I recognize this so deeply at the moment, and I know we'll get onto that later around the shame, is that even with the work, is that the next level has to be unlocked. It's kind of like, the games, because I'm working on a game at the moment. And as you pass through a level, you can't get to the level 2 unless you've gone through level 1. Literally, I'm waiting to publish a game at the moment. It's like,
yes.
God. And that's how kind of it feels in this work, is that, through the years that we were coaching together, every time I got to an insight, great, practiced it, wax on, wax off. That was the whole thing from Karate Kid. And then great, we plateau. We integrate it, have fun for a while, and then it's like, okay, work's got to begin again.
Yep. So true. And I love the way that you describe that. There's always a new layering. There is.
Always.
There's always a new layering. Yeah, always. Yeah.
Always.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So let's go there. Let's talk about shame. Shame, the power of shame is other words that I feel like framing shame up in those words, the power of shame. Talk to me about shame. Like, one of the things that I also love, and this is to do with Jeff Brown's work. He's got a few books, Grounded Spirituality, I think, is one of them. And he has this expression, it's okay to be fully human. I love that, because, in the spiritual world, sometimes it's not okay to be fully human. There's a lot of spiritual bypassing that goes on. I've done it before, that's for sure. I did it before 2013. Completely in delusion and in denial. Completely.
Yeah.
So it's okay to be fully human. Talk to us about the power of shame, about the humanly emotion of shame.
Wow. It's been one of the things that has been such a big part of my experience, particularly the last 6 to 8 months, in more intensely in the last 6 months. And there was another big breakthrough I had, which was a few years ago. Like, I've raised some money for a startup, raised a lot of more money for another startup as I was working on. They're related, all to do with games and metaverse, NFTs, and things like that. And last year was brutal. Like, it was a brutal year, financially, and taking full responsibility. I made a lot of mistakes and a lot of errors in judgment on what to do and what not to do. So, and I can get into that. That could be another 2 days of talking about what the lessons were out of that. What ensued was, in September last year, I had to stand my team down, which was brutal. Like that for me was gut wrenching. In that, there were so many on the team who I developed really deep personal relationships with, and I still have those relationships. It's not that they've disappeared. And I felt a real responsibility to making sure that not only do I do the right thing for people who've put money into the businesses, but also make sure that these people who are brought into the team, I give them the space to grow professionally, and also ideally personally through the work that I do and learn and teach. And just to backtrack a bit, I still remember the time at Velvet Onion where you were coach for the whole team, if people wanted to, and some people took that up, which was great. I love that, and I still had that in mind as being part of the future of what I wanted to do with Planet Neo and Old Saints. So when I stood everybody down, I wept pretty deeply in front of a couple of them, those who I was particularly close with. And I felt like an absolute freaking failure, like a massive failure, because, it was public. Like, what I was doing was quite public. I'd raised money publicly. I'd done a lot of work publicly. I was talking about the reason for doing what I'm doing, the purpose behind it, but also the opportunity around it. So from the heart space of doing things from real purpose to the more masculine, energetic space of, this is great because anyone who puts money in has the potential to earn money back on their investment. Startup, we know startups are fraught with risk. And what had happened, because I was so public, is that I went into a spin, a depression, to be frank. Like, it was a real depression. And for me, depression's best friend is shame. It works so well together. I was like, the language, I was going through, and the things I was saying to myself, and I'm still catching myself some days going through that, around, I'm an idiot. I fucked up so badly. I did this, blah. And I did, even publicly, with the Web3 community. It's toxic, really toxic. And I went there and actually openly stated the mistakes that I did, which some people appreciated, but most of them just tore me to shreds. And I was prepared for that, and that was okay. What was going on is that the story I was telling myself was, I fucked up so royally, and that everybody hates me and nobody will ever trust me again. Okay. And with all the money that was raised, I've seen startups fail spectacularly. I'm talking hundreds of millions. It was nothing in that league whatsoever. For me, it was significant because there were people who I made my own promise energetically to them that I would support them and make their career blossom through this, and create abundance through the things that I was working on. Had some amazing ideas, like really, really amazing ideas, beautiful branding, so much beautiful work that was done. And for me to have it stored on different digital platforms and not really see light of day added to the story that I wasn't a good leader. I'm not a good executor of ideas. I'm basically a shit human being. That was what's been, the thing that was going on.
Mm.
And of course, the second cousin to depression and shame for me was comparison. Not just comparison myself to others, but comparison to me 5 years ago, where I was doing
Oh.
something, comparison to myself that I thought I would be in the future. So these layers of comparison, and I did compare myself to people who had done well, who'd, done the thing that is not me, but stuck with the one thing that they're absolutely brilliant at and done really well financially. So I had all these comparisons going on, which added to the weight of shame, because I could then, hindsight, as we love, is the most valuable tool to add to the shame toolkit if we choose to have the framing of shame on hindsight. And that's the interesting bit, is that if we put the lens of shame on hindsight, it's fucking powerful. It can be so fucking powerful because, of course, I can go back and look at every single mistake that I'd made and every error in judgment that I had missed at that point. And I could piece the whole thing together, and it's like, okay, this is why I'm here now.
Mm.
And so shame was
Mm.
so, it was so multifaceted, and of course ending up with debts as well, like tax debts and things like that. So there was just all this constant barraging of reasons to feel that I'm not good.
Mm.
Yeah.
Talk to us again about shame and hindsight.
Oh yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So the shame bit is, for me, with the privilege of having hindsight,
Yes.
and the time to have hindsight as my mechanism, as part of my toolkit,
Yeah.
to be able to go back and trace my steps and to
Yeah.
look at every single thing, every choice that I made along the way.
Yeah.
And at the point of making the choice, it was with genuine good intention.
Mm.
Genuine good intention. There was, and I can say this with hand on heart, there was no manipulation, there was no greed, there was no self-gain out of any of this. It was like, what is the best thing I can do right now? Often with advice, and often with well-meaning advice, and often with tainted advice. However, I would always make the decisions, whatever the decisions were, with pure intent. And to have the privilege of hindsight, because I'm alive, thankfully.
Mm.
I have
Mm.
time. I have more time on my hands at the moment, so I had that capacity to go back. What that did was, instead of looking at my steps towards failure, they became monuments to my failure.
Wow. Tell us what you mean by that. Wow. Can
So
I just say something? You're the way you have an artistry with language.
I love you. Thank you. So do you.
Oh,
You're my inspiration.
love the way you speak. They are monuments to shame.
Mm.
Is that what you
Mm.
said?
Or to failure, but they are,
Okay.
literally the
Failure.
reasons I can hang my shame hat
Yeah. Yeah.
on. And and again, this is all the self-flagellation that
Yeah.
comes with it. So decisions in hiring, is that where you would like me to go
Yeah. Yeah.
towards?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. So hiring, again, I hired really, really good people, and often at the wrong time.
Yeah. Right.
um, Deciding on having more time in experimentation and less time in delivering, for example. Getting to things that went to market that were tested really well, got amazing feedback, and didn't land. They just didn't work. And we had a couple of interesting twists, which were, the COVID lockdowns were two twists. that really did hurt. However, looking at owning the whole of my reality, it was decisions that led us to having really shaky foundations that enable COVID to create the damage, And that's what it came to. That's where those moments, the monumental moments, those shrines to my failure, just I could literally list them all. And while they're good lessons for me moving forward, they are also painful lessons, Yeah. So that was all the things that I had done that I could go back and trace literally step by step. The other added layer was a couple of people had put in, I raised money through crowdfunding, which was people could contribute anything from $250, somebody contributed up to 100,000. So, most people, it was relatively small amounts, but I was getting, again, maybe overly generous feedback from a couple of people who were really, really pissed off on how I pivoted the company away from breakfast cereals towards technology. And what I was able to do with those two stories was extrapolate and look at every other person who I don't hear from and make up a story that they all hate me, which added to this. It wasn't evidence-based shame. It was very much created out of extrapolating a couple of bits of feedback into what I believed, particularly towards the end of last year, was I will never, ever be able to be trusted again. People hate me, or blah, blah, blah. All those things that go so well with shame.
And where are you at now?
I feel calmer, more resolved. And it was interesting. I know you and I spoke about this the other day at Breaky. I had again, I love my accountant to bits. She's one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. And we had a call with the lawyer to discuss about winding down the companies. And, that's one way of clearing debts and all of that. It didn't sit well with me because I'm still working, on what I believe are the things that matter, even though it's slower than what the world would have expected, because, again, funds ran out. And having tax debt to pay is never, never comfortable because, it's ugly because, it's just like, money I've got to spend. And it feels like spending. It's not an investment. It's like, but again, that was bad decision making. And the advice to wind down the companies, I said, look, that was on a Friday afternoon. I sat with it and realized that there is another way. I found this space in between all the noise in my head and all the well-meaning advice, because it wasn't the first person who suggested, again, with the best of intentions, all for my own sake, to wind down everything and just dust myself off and then see what's next. So none of it sat well with me. And what I'd been ignoring over the last couple of months was this guy who was hounding me about a research and development grant. Okay. And I did my own calculations, and although the debts I'm in right now, the tax debts, feel significant, they're quite insignificant in the big picture of what I'm working towards. They're really insignificant. And I did my own calculations and thought, I'm fine. I'm okay. I can do this. And I know I can do it. So, of course, how I am now is I'm cautiously moving forward with my chapter next, which is still everything I had been working on, with the tying it together with the thing that I'm called to do in this world, which is, that's the next version of, I'll just hush quietly, my next version of what education will look like with everything I've learned over the last 2 years.
So that was going to be my next question. So we'll go there and then go into the hush.
Yeah. So yes. So how
can I just say something? So we know, you and I have lived this premise. Sometimes we forget, sometimes we then remember it, that everything was perfect as it was.
Yeah.
Because we create the whole of our reality with love and wisdom always.
always.
There's divine perfection in everything. So everything was perfect as it was. So frame up what's arriving now in that premise, if you can.
Absolutely. You know, when you did my intro just now,
yes,
it's just interesting to see that things that I love, and I could draw circles around specific disciplines and look at the weight of experience I have in all of them. You know, when I look at the weight of experience I've got in customer experience design, the weight of experience I have with education, the weight of experience I have with technology, the weight of experience I have with being in touch with my humanness, with married to my spirit, my true nature and purpose, I can literally put them in big circles and look at them, and they're big bubbles. I'm not going to do a Venn diagram with them because they're all one. It's all me. Like, it's all me. There's no Venn diagram needed. I look at all of them together, and I look at it and think, well, I have so much experience, and in some cases so much expertise, and I'm not expert in all of those areas, but I have so much experience in them. And in the areas where I do have the expertise, this is where having the space as well, having that space where, you know, I've got the chance to reflect, come out of the depression, come out of the brutal self-doubt and the self shit talk that I've been doing. I've come out and realized that what I'm meant to be doing is more than what I've been doing, but not like in terms of adding more to my plate. There's the amoreness that has come through.
Amoreness. I love that. Amoreness.
And I just heard that again. Amor means, like, you know, in Italian, amore, love.
Yeah.
Amoreness. Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
And I looked at, you know, where I'm sitting right now. I'm actually in the bedroom because we're quite noisy downstairs. So I've got my vision board just over on the other wall. And I look at the things that are there. So, you know, there's things about Planet Neo, there's education around that, animations, which, you know, you've seen a little snippet of it, travel, and doing some good, deep work, you know, fun and play is up there as well. And I look at all the things that I have done and look at what I've learned in the last 2.5 years and how that absolutely can and will come together, because it may not make sense to the outside world. Yes.
That's because you see a future beyond, or before, I should say, other people have the ability to see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
That the things about bringing the metaverse, you know, I know you're still trying to get your head around that. Truth is, most people are. Okay. So it's such a broad concept. It's like trying to describe internet. It's more than just a computer, right? So that's the same with that's another one. But how do I bring emerging tech, new models as well, new models around digital ownership, bring games, bring education, bring purpose, right? And bring serious design sensibility into making really complicated things simple again. And I look at all the things and it's like, okay, everything makes sense, because I can bring my years of customer experience design work together, my years of launching startups at various degrees of success. You know, the spectrum of goes from abject failure to pretty good.
He's being humble there.
Yeah, pretty good. You know, so that spectrum of experience in that, and then adding all the new things that I've learned around tokenomics and Web3 models and how to create genuine community and ownership of a business model. It's like, okay, here we go.
You know, where it started to make sense for me was one time you said to me, somebody in Africa, for example, with the game that you're creating. Somebody in Africa, for example, could get rewarded by going to clean up rubbish on the beach.
Yep.
They can actually get rewarded for that.
Yep.
That's when it started to kind of make sense for me. Yep.
Yeah. And that for me is using technology, using new models, using education as a mechanism to trigger change. Because, you see it everywhere. Education, for the most part, is still an elite concept. That was one of the clashes I had in my last startup. Was there was a decision to drop scholarships, and I was furious about it. And I said, because we were purpose driven, and I do that with air quotes. And somebody said, education is impact enough. And my response was, yes, if you can afford it. And that went like a lead balloon. That didn't really go. There was no discussion after that. And for me, it's like, well, okay, so we can actually integrate really affordable education models. And there's more. There's a new sort of layering that came through the other day where we can reward people to do things, as you said, clean up the ocean, and give them credits towards learning a skill that gets them into the gig economy. Imagine you cleaning up your local neighborhood, and all of a sudden you've earned yourself a chance to learn a course in coding. And bang, you're on Upwork earning $50 an hour, whereas your monthly earnings would have been $50. Right?
If the listeners could see me right now, I'm kind of like nodding in like disbelief of just how bloody brilliant this is.
And that literally, that I was speaking with a developer yesterday about how can we build this? Not we don't need to build the full version right now, but what's the basic version we can get started with? That was my big learning from the last couple of years, is that we're going big and trying to build the big thing rather than going, what's the most basic thing we can do first and get that up.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that's where it's all coming together. So, and thank you for asking how I am now as I speak it out loud, because I haven't spoken it out loud like this. I feel an aliveness, and I feel a genuine animation in my body. I actually, at a cellular level, I can feel things moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're an incredible example of someone who follows the intuitive pull. Like every one of these startups that you've spoken about, whether they've been, you've defined them as being a failure, or whether you've defined them as being pretty good, which, as I said, you're being a bit humble there.
I do harsh and humble.
Harsh and humble, the two H's. Every one of those has been the result of following the intuitive pull. And if I think about the cereals, of course, the cereals weren't successful. Yes, you could blame it on all the reasons that you have and COVID and all the rest of it, and take responsibility, which you have. But the biggest picture, it just wasn't the form that had the greatest impact, that would have the greatest impact. And That's for you, it's all about the impact. It's all about the impact for you. I mean, you wanted to educate people about the planet through these cereals and kids learning about, the endangered species and all the rest of it. But you made a comment. What was that comment? It was really, really, really spectacular. And it was comparing the change that you could have, or the impact that you could have made through the cereals versus the impact that you can make by, a kid in Africa going to clean up.
That's right.
Oh,
that was the post. That was that post I put up on LinkedIn. I think it was something about.
Yes, was that
elitism on a supermarket shelf?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it was, because again, it was a product that you had to pay, and reasonable amount of money for, and it was on some shelves. However, again, it came down to the impact that if a kid in Africa or in Indonesia is living in squalor, which of course not all people are, but there's a lot of people who are. And how do I get to that young girl or young boy who has the capacity to be so freaking brilliant in our context of of abundance, what we talk about in terms of abundance and being able to create a family, whatever they want to do, buying a box of cereals and donating 10 cents to a charity does nothing. It literally does nothing. However, put a game in their hand and give them direct rewards and get them earning their way towards a program that can get them on Upwork or freelancer.com or Fiverr earning $50 an hour. That has impact.
That changes somebody's life. I mean, that just directly and literally changes somebody's life.
And my other layering with this, and again, this takes a while to get these sort of things up and running, is that has a direct impact on the community that they're in as well. Because if there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, all of them learning different disciplines around technology, all of them becoming aware of the fact that if they improve their environment, there's also money to be made in regenerative farming. There's more money to be made in tourism of when an area is luscious and naturally abundant. They've got incomes coming in. They've got people coming to visit. Restaurants can open up. Tour guides can start doing things. It really can genuinely trigger a whole lot more in the community than just enough for that one person to make a really good living.
And talk about you're talking about breathtaking ripples of impact here.
Yeah,
breathtaking ripples that affect an ecosystem. That's what you're talking about, versus a kid going to the supermarket shelf and reading about an endangered species and going, wow, I didn't realize there were that many orangutans left in the world. And that has its own impact, and he's going to care, of course, more about, and he might even talk about it, but is it really going to change? Is it really going to make the difference that you're talking about now? No. And so I want to make this point around following the intuitive pull and really acknowledging you, Charbel, because I follow the intuitive pull, but I don't go and have these visions. They don't come to me. It's not who I am, where I have to raise funds, to execute my vision. I don't, and therefore be really public about my vision. It's just not who I am, but that's who you are. So I really, really want to acknowledge you, because that's bloody courageous. It's so courageous to continue to, that expression, failing forward. Because it's really not a failure, right? Because where you're at now, you couldn't be here talking about that level of impact had you not had the cereals not worked. You couldn't, right? So it was, again, everything has a purpose. Everything was perfect as it was, of course. But in the meantime, you do go and face, people commenting to you, on you, about your failures. You do, because you're so public. So I just really, really, really want to acknowledge, and I hope that you have even more compassion for yourself, because your makeup as you are is someone, I mean, people follow you. I feel like you're the Pied Piper. People love you, especially when you're in that, when you allow yourself to be in your leadership out there in the world. And I know that you've kind of been in your world recently because you've had to be, but when you're out there in the world, people love you. People absolutely love you and learn from you. And so thank you for being who you are, because it's bloody courageous. And I hope that you walk away with even more love for self.
Thank you. It's great actually speaking out loud, because I've been working on it quite privately, and I've shared a couple of things with you via messages. There's clearly, and you've said this to me, and you say this to me constantly, my power is being out there and talking, doing presentations, meeting people, doing what needs to be done, and being visible, not being invisible.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity to be able to speak that out.
Yeah. Thank you. And who knows, it feels like there's a little bit of a series here that might want to be had. It's Absolutely. Like, we know that book Tuesdays with Maury.
Yes.
I feel like what's today? Wednesdays with Charbel.
I love that. Look, I love these chats. I love what you do. And I've met so many people who've come through the various programs that you've offered over the years. And there is no shortage of love for and between everybody, and I love that. That's one of my many things. I know we've got a couple of very close mutual friends who've both coached with you, and we've dined and gone and done things together. I love that. For me, having had the last 6 months in relative isolation, and living in Sydney close to a beach is kind of handy, especially because we finally have a good summer, has been great. Being in my own sort of mental lockdown has been good, but enough of it.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Enough.
So thank you so much for sharing you with us.
Thank you for the questions. You always ask the best questions. You really do. I had, like anyone who's listening, I had no script. I had no idea what we were going to be talking about, and my tendency is to waffle, which I'm doing right now.
No, you're not. No, you're not. But speaking of, when I do interview people, I have people ask me, are you going to send me a list of questions before we get on? And I say no, because we're just going to have a conversation from a place of presence. That's what's going to happen. It's just,
I love that.
Create itself.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And that's what I expect Madonna would do before you interviewed her. a set of approved questions.
That's so funny. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. I think we're going to be back here again soon.
Oh, there's so much I'd love to speak about. I've got a few other things that that take us beyond ourselves as well.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Newer experiences I'd love to share with you.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Massive love to you too.
Love.
And you can see my love print behind me.
I can. I noticed that.
Yes, it's in my bedroom.
So to the listeners, yes, I hope you feasted on that conversation, and share your love. Let us know what occurred for you, and let me be able to pass that back on to this incredible man, Charbel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, if you love this podcast, I have 2 requests. Number 1, sign up to the newsletter, which you can find in the show notes. Sharing is one of my superpowers, and there is only so much that I can share through the medium of podcasting. And I have very big plans this year to be radically generous to you. So sign up to that newsletter, where you'll be able to receive a whole lot more that I trust will be super valuable to you. And number 2, I'm a massive referrer of the people I love to the people I love. Please share this episode or podcast with the people you love, and let's create some more breathtaking ripples of impact.